everyone. We are on Treaty 6 territory, and I also want to recognize the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. My name is Marie Renaud. I am the MLA for St. Albert and the Opposition Critic for Seniors, Community and Social Services. I'm joined by my colleague Heather Sweet, who is the MLA for Edmonton Manning and the Critic for Rural Economic Development, Agriculture and Forestry. Yesterday, October's Consumer Price Index data was released showing that Canada's inflation rate is at 6.8%, a staggering number that will continue to hammer household budgets. And food prices have shot up well above that to 10.1% to what we compared to 1 year ago. Trip to the grocery store will continue to be a devastating experience for many families. It's even worse when looking at the price increase on some essential items that families purchase literally every week. For example, margarine is up 40.4% from last year. So this tub of margarine cost $6.42 last year, now is at $9. Dry pasta, like the box of fettuccine, has increased 27.2%. Fresh fruit, like strawberries, up 8.9%. Fresh vegetables like lettuce and peppers are up 11%. Meat, like chicken or beef, up 5.5%. Coffee and teas have increased 13.1%. While grocery prices continue to rise, everyone is still dealing with other inflationary pressures, like rising price of gasoline and increases to their utilities. UCP is adding to inflation by forcing Albertans to pay more in income taxes, property taxes, utility costs, school fees, tuition, interest on student debt, and of course, park fees. Wages in Alberta haven't kept pace with inflation, forcing more and more Albertans to rely on credit cards just to be able to afford their groceries. For those that don't have the luxury of having a credit card, they're forced to go to places like payday loans. And we've all heard about that dangerous cycle. As Albertans are struggling to afford the basics, Canadian grocers are reporting massive profits. Yesterday, as CPI is showing that grocery prices continue to rise, Loblaws released its third quarter report, which was another highly profitable quarter. Not too surprising. Loblaws reported a last quarter earnings of $556 million, up 29% from last year. And Loblaws earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization growth of an additional $172 million, which is a 10.3% increase from last year. Also, over the last 3 quarters, Loblaws has spent over $1.1 billion in stock buybacks to boost its own stock price and benefit shareholders. That's shameful. As Albertans are faced with skyrocketing prices, Loblaws had the luxury of investing over $1 billion into share price just to benefit shareholders. We know that the increased cost of food hurts those in poverty the most. Every dollar increases pushes more and more Albertans into food insecurity. Some are going hungry, some are missing meals, and some may not eat nutritional food for days on end while they wait for their next paycheck. During a conference call with shareholders, Loblaws' Galen Weston stated that, and I quote, "We're seeing a lot more Mercedes and Range Rovers in the parking lots in those discount stores than we would have before." While Mr. Weston used this anecdote to highlight the success of budget stores, like No Frills, he ignores the fact that everyone is feeling the pinch. I know when I shop in those stores, what I see are people really scouring prices and looking for deals because they're stressed. While some have the opportunity to choose cheaper options, far too many have nowhere else to go. They already are relying on cheaper options, and that's why we're seeing record dependency on Alberta food banks. I would like now to turn it over to my colleague, Heather Sweet.
Well, thank you, Marie. And while the large corporate grocers continue to rake in massive profits and invest over $1 billion in stock buybacks, our Premier has stayed silent. As Marie pointed out, grocery prices continue to outpace the rate of inflation, and it's one of the biggest increase in costs on Alberta families. But Danielle Smith has shown no interest in providing relief. Over the last week, she has outlined her government's mandates. She has prioritized downloading millions of dollars onto municipalities for the new provincial police force. She wants to continue the scheme of moving Alberta CPP to create an Alberta pension plan, which we know will cost Albertans more money. And she is focused on passing the Sovereignty Act, which will only scare away economic investment and drive up costs on essential goods like groceries. In light of continued skyrocketing costs of food and continued profit growth of corporate grocers like Loblaws, we are calling on Danielle Smith to start focusing on what Albertans need and what they need help with the most. And we want her to open an investigation into record profits on these large corporate grocery chains. The investigation will be responsible to review the business practices of the large corporate grocers over the last 2 years to ensure they're not capitalizing on the cost of living crisis. As well, the investigation will assess the impact of the lack of competitiveness in Alberta and propose recommendations on increasing that competitiveness in Alberta if it's needed. Alberta has arguably the less competitive market for grocers, with 2 corporate grocers controlling a large portion of the market. As profits grow and prices of essential groceries like butter, fruit, and vegetables become more and more unaffordable, we need to take real action in addressing the systemic issues that are driving up the cost of our groceries. So I'm calling on Danielle Smith to please work with us to start this investigation and finally take the affordability crisis facing Albertans seriously. Because Albertans cannot wait another 6 months for an ineffective UCP government. Thank you, and I'll turn the mic back to Marie, and we're both happy to take your questions.
All right, we will go over to the Zoom and phone for questions. If you're on the Zoom, please use the raise hand function, and the phone, please use *9. And caller, your line should be open.
CBC. Question for Marie. We talked last week about food banks, and when we talked, you said that this directive to create a strategy for food banks in Minister Nixon's mandate letter, you had said that the government needs to address the core roots of poverty rather than expand food banks. Mm-hmm. But setting that aside, what other actions would you take to help Alberta food banks right now? What would you tackle first?
Well, I think, one of the problems is the stress on the food banks. Clearly, they don't have enough food. They need the funds to buy the food. So clearly, if Alberta food banks need resources to meet the demand right now, that's what government needs to do. However, going forward, I think what the government needs to do is, instead of focusing their energy on building a strategy going forward to boost up food banks or to strengthen them so that they can deal with food insecurity, we need to look at the root causes of poverty. So for now, we know that there's a huge percentage of people that are on disability pension that are accessing food banks right across the province. So we know immediately addressing the shortfall in disability pensions like AISH or income support, barriers for employment, we know that that will immediately take some pressure off food banks. And that's just one thing. There are a number of things that we need to be looking at to address poverty so that we start to reduce the reliance on food banks. These are not preventative social services. We know this. These, food banks are fantastic. They meet an essential need. I'm so thankful that they're there. However, we need to, and they will agree, that we need to work towards a time where we don't have to rely on food banks, that people are able to support themselves. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Janet?
Yeah, just more generally, what is your reaction to the Premier making this a priority for Mr. Nixon?
Food bank strategy? I think it's great that the Premier is acknowledging the pressure on food banks, but I think she needs to look a little further than that. That's very superficial. I think she needs to look at the damage that has been done over the last 3 years by this UCP government. One of the first things they did was de-index all income supports, like AISH, seniors benefit, barriers for employment, expected to work income support, and instantly we saw people's earning power going down. So that was just one step. We have seen cuts to affordable housing, to housing subsidies, to so many different programs, in addition to all of the costs that have gone up. So, there's a lot that that this premier needs to look back at the 3 years of history, undo some of that damage, but go a step further. And that's what we're prepared to do should we form government going forward, that we will have some progressive strategies and solutions, not just, putting Band-Aids on problems and undoing things that the UCP have done. But we want to address the root causes of some of these problems that we're starting to see. So when we hear food banks tell us that they are stretched and overwhelmed right across the province, we aren't surprised by that. We've been sadly worried about that for quite some time, given the de-indexation of benefits.
Great, thank you, Janet. And we will make another pass for questions. Again, that is *9 on the phone or the raise hand function on the Zoom. And seeing no more, that will conclude our press conference. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thanks so much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.